All right, what's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's been doing okay. Sorry we've been out for a little while, kind of going through some sickness and some things like that, and just things out of our control that we can't control at all. So we appreciate you for stopping by and taking a look at another one of my locker room videos. I always like to go over Joe Klatt stuff and the new things that he puts out. Usually I agree with him a lot of times, sometimes I don't. So let's go ahead and get right into it, see what Joe's got going on today. All right.
Let's start, though, by diving back into what has happened. What did we just see, folks? We saw the playoff. We saw the New Year's Six games. Here's what we saw in the college football playoff. Not all that competitive, was it? Bama absolutely took care of Cincinnati. Michigan was no match for Georgia, 34-11 in that one, 27-6 in the first game that day. And listen, folks, there was basically zero meaningful touchdowns scored.
All right. Well, let's get right into it here. Do some reaction with Joe. Bama wins 27-6 over Cincinnati, and I think the game turned out how everybody expected it to. Does Cincinnati, are they deserving to be there? I think they just kind of got the number 4 spot by default because who else was you going to put in? I mean, you're going to put Ohio State back in there. They were a 2-loss team. You just seen them get trashed by Michigan earlier, 2 weeks before. So that was still kind of fresh on people's mind. They had lost to the first year to Oregon, and Oregon had done lost now twice to Utah, which, comes on out later to play Ohio State, a good game in the Rose Bowl. However, I think it just kind of turned out like you'd want it to see. Let's see, what do we have here? Bama had 482 total. They passed for 181, but they rushed for over 300 yards. And Robinson Jr. had a fantastic game. He's a native from Tuscaloosa. He really showed out. Really proud for him. Not to analyze that game very much because we will be on Sunday night back at our regular time at 6 o'clock here on YouTube. And we'll get more into it. So if you want to know more about the game and kind of what we thought about it, tune in Sunday night. So that's just kind of how it went for the game. There was really no chance for Cincinnati to win the game. The game of football was played and won up front in the trenches. And you can say that there was no adjustment from Cincinnati. I think Joe gets into that and talking about that. They play a 3-3 stack style defense, and there's just no way you're going to stop much running game. It's okay for the teams that they play against in their conference, but to try to compete with some of the best linemen in the nation, it's going to be a pretty tall order to fill. So let's get right back into it.
Against the SEC in the college football playoffs. It was completely dominant from both Bama and from Georgia. From a physical standpoint, neither Cincinnati nor Michigan could match up at the line of scrimmage. And
that's about it. So we'll talk a little bit about the Georgia game. Georgia went for 521 total. Michigan had 328 total. And Georgia passed for over 330. They only run for about 200. Now, Michigan threw for almost 240 on Georgia, but they only rushed for about 90 yards. Again, it's always the same thing that everybody assumes this Big Ten is always going to have some team that's going to make a run these playoffs. We've seen over the past 10 years. I mean, one time, Ezekiel Elliott comes down here and just handled Alabama very easily, which we didn't know a whole lot about the guy. We knew he was good, and come to find out, he was really, really good. So, again, the game is won and lost up front in the trenches, and Michigan's offensive line had been awarded to be the top offensive line in the nation. These awards and stuff that committees hand out, I think it just proves that they don't really know. And unless it's just a clear-cut runaway, some of these things are just given out by default. No different than Cincinnati being put at number 4 is, why else would you give an offensive line award to Michigan? Why? I mean, who have they played? Let's go back and look at their record. And yes, they won their conference, but I think if Michigan plays in the SEC West, they're a 2 or a 3-loss team. Okay? Now, we're not going to break down that game. Like I said, me and Diamond Dean will be back on Sunday night at 6 o'clock live here on YouTube. So just to kind of talk a little bit about that, yes, the game is won up front. What did we learn about Georgia, though? That's what I want to take away from this. They played Michigan. Okay? The Harbaugh era has been just what it has been all the years he's been there. He just can't put a team together that can compete with some of the best players from college football. That's about it because of talent. Let's go look at high school talent. Let's see about where these kids play at, where they're from, because from the state of Georgia, go watch the Georgia State Championship game, the high school games, and you'll see. I mean, everybody knows what happens at the Collins Hill. The kid, Tucker, Travis Hunter, goes out and goes to Jackson State, and all that's already known about. He played at Collins Hill. I watched him play in the state championship game, and there's not only him, but about 7 or 8 other guys on that team that also is going to play Division I football. That's where it's won at. It's by recruits. And the best kids playing football right now, it's mostly in Georgia and Alabama and Florida. There are some good recruits in other parts of the country. I'm not saying that at all. But for the most part, just look at the scores of these games. Just go back and watch these games. And what I want to ask you guys is, what did we learn about Georgia? Well, we learned Georgia could win a football game. Well, like I just said, though, if Michigan comes over, say if Michigan and Georgia swaps, I don't think Michigan makes the playoffs. I just don't have no faith in the Big Ten. Even when me and Dean's on doing our Sunday night shows, we get some comments about some teams from the Big Ten, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, and Iowa, because they got to play, for the title and all, and that's great. But I'm telling you, it's just not the same. The conference and the ability is just not there. So what did we really learn about Georgia again for the third time? I don't think we learned anything, because they're still going to have to play Alabama for the national championship. Let's carry on with Joe, see what he's got.
It was painfully obvious, basically the very first run that Alabama had with Brian Robinson in the game against Cincinnati. Cincinnati runs a very unique style of defense, where it's kind of it's kind of like a stack 3-3-5. The problem is that you cannot hold up against a powerful run game without much stronger edges. And without those edges, what you see is that you saw the offensive line just absolutely maul down the edge of the defensive line from Cincinnati, and they had no chance. They had no chance. I would say this. Listen, I think Luke Fickell and his coaching staff do a really good job in general. When I watch their film, I love what they do offensively. Defensively, they fly around. They play man coverage. They're generally more talented than their opponents in that league, in particular on the outside defensively with guys like, Ahmad Gardner and Kobe Bryant. The problem is that you got into this game and it was very apparent that Alabama was going to be, I want to call it conservative, but they didn't have to put the ball up in the air. They were just going to run the football because they were physically better up front than Cincinnati, and Cincinnati never adjusted. I'm like, what? You've got two of the best corners in college football if you're Cincinnati, and they never zeroed up by zero.
He's talking about let the players play man out there on the corners, and let's just send the house. Let's just continue to just constantly keep pressure on Young and the line of scrimmage to plug up some of these gaps and not be in a 3-4, but maybe in a 4-3 or maybe a 4-4 style defense.
Zero up, I mean, bring all the safeties down, bring all the resources down to stop the run. And zero up, meaning like zero coverage, zero safeties in the middle of the field, man coverage on the outside. You never one time allowed Ahmad Gardner, who, by the way, probably is the best corner in college football, at least the one that played for the entirety of the season. Maybe the top corner selected in the NFL draft. We'll see. He's certainly a first-round talent. And they never just said, like, hey, we're going to take our chances with him, our best player, against Jameson Williams, and we're going to commit everyone else to stopping the run. I never felt like they did that. And from a game plan perspective, Alabama did exactly what you should do. Since that wasn't happening against Cincinnati, they just said, okay, we're just going to run the ball right down your throat. And Brian Robinson had a phenomenal day. Kudos to him. That offensive line did a great job. So that was the first game, 27-6. Then Georgia and Michigan, and then everyone's excited, right? It's kind of what we maybe expected in the first game. It's like, listen, it's great that Cincinnati got there. I think that they deserved it. I'm glad that they were in the playoff, but it wasn't all that close, in particular physically. Then you get to the nightcap and you're like, all right, here we go. Michigan, the powerful run game, their offensive line, Aiden Hutchinson and that defense, Dax Hill is going to play. You get all excited about this. You think about Georgia and the way that they played against Alabama, and you think to yourself, maybe they weren't as dominant as we thought. Then the game kicked off. And the physical domination by Georgia was apparent.
But that don't prove nothing. To me, it just proves my theory correct even more. The Big Ten is not good. They've never been good. They had 1 year run at it, and it took, how long did it take Urban to build that team? It took a coach from the SEC to come with SEC plays and ideas and coaches to get a team ready from the North to beat the team from the South. So none of that really means anything at all.
And the physical domination by Georgia was apparent. Folks, they owned them at the line of scrimmage. That defensive line led by Jordan Davis was phenomenal.
Now, we want to talk about Jordan Davis. I expected a lot more from him in the SEC title game. He was just irrelevant completely. Now, I know Alabama's offensive line can be spotty at best. We've seen what they've been through all year. The things that they did in the SEC game to try to change things up a little bit reminds you that things like changing the snap counts to how the cadence and the rhythm between Young and the center were made, those type of things are what was changed from the Auburn game to the Georgia game. And it was definitely for sure of who was running the line of scrimmage. Bama, beats Georgia by 3 touchdowns nearly to this first game. And now we want to say how dominant Georgia is, but they're playing Michigan. You have to give kudos to the same degree of that you give Alabama as you do to Georgia, and you have to give the same kudos and respect that you give Michigan as you did Cincinnati. Michigan got in by default because there was nobody else, because the Pac-12 really didn't even have a champ. I guess you could say they did. Utah, good gracious, guys. These teams, especially out west, because of things out of some of the kids' control, they can't help what decisions that adults make out there through all this politics and stuff. They didn't even have a season last year, really. So we just have to be careful when you're just propping up these guys and putting them in here. Yes, Georgia played good, but they didn't conquer the world by beating Michigan. I think Michigan and Cincinnati should have played first to see who played Alabama. That's what we should have done.
The line of scrimmage, that defensive line led by Jordan Davis was phenomenal.
No show in
SEC
SEC
Kobe
game.
Dean
Davis
was flying around. The speed that they had on the second level of their defense was so apparent, and it was dominant over that Michigan team. That offensive line for Michigan didn't have a chance. I felt, frankly, sorry for Cade McNamara because he didn't have any time. There wasn't, what are you going to...
And another guy from the Big Ten that they invite to another stinking Heisman Award show. I wish they would stop doing that. It's a bust every time. Yeah, they go up there and they look good, and against the games they play when they're playing each other, it's not even good. And they show up and play. It's not. Fields, we've seen what he did, and these other guys that's been invited up to win at the Heisman ceremony. This Hutchinson guy is supposed to be this just all-American Braveheart rushing defensive end. He did nothing. And then Odaja boy, nothing. They can't even make a play. They couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback. Georgia run for almost 200 yards on them. Are you kidding me? These guys is all they talked about. It's the same thing they did with Notre Dame when Te'o is supposed to. He won every award that you could possibly win. And Eddie Lacy is a decent Alabama running back. He made them look stupid. These guys just push these guys forward so much and prop them up so much with all these awards, and then they get to the big games and they just flop completely.
Do from a skill position standpoint, if you're Michigan, other than just get put into very tough situations. They started turning the football over. Georgia was dominant with that defense. That was impressive. I got to tell you, I thought that Michigan was going to be able to run enough to get to the wrinkles, to get to the play action pass, to have the tight end matchups where they would be able to score, 17, 24 points. Not even close. Not even close. And then Georgia on the other side offensively, they were able to play conservatively. Stetson Bennett did a nice job getting the ball out of his hands quickly, and that negated the pass rush from guys like David Ajabo on the outside for Michigan and Aiden Hutchinson. So a really smart and good game plan from Georgia that was really executed at a premium level, an elite level by the line of scrimmage on both sides, offensively and defensively. Michigan gets the late touchdown. Listen, they've got a lot of good young players. I can't wait to see what they can turn into here in the next couple of years with another good quality recruiting class or two. But this one wasn't particularly close. Not quite what Michigan State did in their playoff game or what Ohio State did in their first playoff game. Remember those not Ohio State's first, but that playoff game against Clemson. So it wasn't the worst.
Yeah, and what did we find out against Clemson? They propped Georgia up on all this schedules they've run over there in the bad SEC East. Guys, they're knocking down these guys like Tennessee and Florida. Well, but Florida played Alabama a close game, big man. You're crazy just being a homer. Go back and watch the game, okay? Before you get on here and start chewing up comments down there, go watch the game of Alabama and Florida. Rewatch it. I've watched it 2 times, and I'm telling you, the score does not identify the difference in talent out there on that field. Bama is way ahead. They hit the cruise control button, and Florida tries to make a run back there at it at the end because they're walking around with their head up their butt half the rest of the game because it's not even fun. It's the smart kid in class that's already done taking his test and helped everybody else around him. He looks around, he's over there getting in trouble for tapping his pencil on the table. Bama was bored in that game. So those comparisons that you try to, well, but they lost to A&M. Yes, they did. They just got whipped up front. Hats off to Jimbo and his staff. They put together a great game plan. And they did defeat Alabama. With a field goal at the end of the game. You guys act like it was 34-0. Like A&M just romps Bama. So we got to have good comparisons. So if you're going to have good arguments, then you got to have good comparisons. I mean, guys, Michigan ran for 90 yards. They're not that good. The Big Ten is just not a quality program, okay?
First Big Ten performance that we've seen in a college football playoff, but the domination from Georgia was apparent, and now we've got these two teams that have, let's be honest, Georgia was the best team all year. We didn't see their loss coming against Alabama in the SEC championship game, and now we're going to get those two again. More on that in just a moment. But I wanted to get to these other bowl games because while those games weren't great, you can talk about them, and they certainly had great elements, in particular on one side of those performances. We did have amazing games in the other New Year's Six bowl.
Now, let's talk about these games here for a minute. Y'all tell me what you think. Go up here. See, we got Oklahoma State and Notre Dame. I thought it was a good game. 35-37, Oklahoma State pulls one out. The Rose Bowl was great. Baylor beats Ole Miss because Matt Corral could not play. And then the Michigan State and Pitt game, Michigan State wins that one. Well, Pitt didn't have some of their players. Having their best quarterback, the guy that's past Dan Marino, because you got all these kids quitting on their team because they can't play one more game. God forbid if they play one more game, because you got to leave right then as soon as the regular season's over. And NFL says that you got to leave that day and got to report the next day to the NFL so you can go out there and have all your paperwork done, and they got to do all these tests the next day while you're still getting ready for bowl game. No, that's not what's going on. Now, if that's what was happening, you had to leave your college program, quit on your team because of dates and timestamps, because of your professional job that you're going to enter. Hey, I get it. But just to opt out, just because you may get hurt, I promise you right now, Matt Corral would not go back and change what happened to him at this game. They lose 21-7, and it's only because they couldn't score because of him, because he didn't play, but he got hurt. Well, see there, big man, if he'd opted out, he's not going to change anything. Your brand that you've already created through the season has already been stamped. We know where you're going to go. You're not, because of injury, they're going to say, well, that's it. You know, he's definitely going to drop from a middle first round, late first round to second round. That's not going to happen. Now, if he went out there and like broke his neck, you know, if we're just going to be ridiculous and just make some ludicrous arguments, it will just be ridiculous and just make the arguments that, yeah, if something astonishing happens, just catastrophic. But these games were lost because their players quit on their team. But I would also like to add Iowa 17, Kentucky 20. Kentucky. Now let's say Iowa. I think, didn't they play for the Big Ten championship? Wasn't they the other team up there? I think they were. Kentucky was not a conference runner-up. They had a fantastic season, and Coach Stoops and staff does a great job at Kentucky. Guys, they are a middle-of-the-road SEC team.
Notre Dame game was sensational. I was at the Rose Bowl with my family. It was the first time I ever got to take my boy over 10 years. My wife asked me, well, it's a great question. It had been over 10 years. And so to be able to take my kids and go to the Rose Bowl was phenomenal. Baylor, I thought that game against Ole Miss, there was a lot to talk about there. Clearly, with Matt Corral, the quarterback, we're going to get to that a little bit. I'm going to talk about transfers. I'm going to talk about opt-outs. And then that Pitt-Michigan State game, I thought that was a terrific game as well. Oklahoma State, that's a huge momentum win building forward for that program.
And Oklahoma State is terrible. I'm telling you, they're not a great football team. Not at all. I mean, they're just not. And they win by 2 over Notre Dame. They don't even have their coach and half their players too. I'm telling you, you guys, you got to keep this stuff in perspective.
The Rose Bowl was insane, and the individual performance from Jackson Smith and Jigba was unreal. And you could feel it even sitting in the stands. You know, you didn't have to have a television and the graphics.
This kid had a fantastic game, Smith and Jigba. I mean, Ohio State passes for 573. This cat's got 347 with 3 touchdowns. They had 683 total yards for the day against Utah. Utah. Yes.
And the replays to know that this guy was putting on an absolute show. 15 catches, 347 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And that was against the Utah defense that all year had been pretty salty. That was an amazing...
Salty. Joe, are we talking about the low salt crackers, the cheap pig, the Wiggly brand? What are you talking about? Salty. Who have they beat? The best offensive Utah's played is who? Oregon's? Where do they rank at in the nation in the offense? Go look it up. Because I have. They're not good. Now, Ohio State did have some players quit on their team, and they still winning the game. That tells you how bad Utah is.
Performance from Jackson Smith and Jigba. It was amazing to watch. I loved being there. I think that the Rose Bowl is the mecca of college football. It reveals itself. You kind of drive down to the Aurora Sicko, and then boom, here it is with kind of like the ray of shining light on the Rose Bowl. What an amazing day that it was. Now, just a reminder, folks, because we saw great bowl games and not great playoff games. What if we had this 12-team playoff? Remember?
Now, speaking of the 12-team playoff, news that we're hearing today through Heather Dinich, SEC, the committee will be meeting tomorrow. That'd be Saturday. The committee will meet tomorrow, and they're going to go over this 12-team playoff. There's a lot of coaches that are not really into this 12-team playoff. There are some that are for a 6-team, to have a 6-team playoff. So now the contract's supposed to run through 2025. So I don't think they're going to change the meeting. Now they could come out and break it all up and do it just like Joe's got it laid out. And I'm not totally against how he's got this laid out here. Do something to keep these kids from quitting, because college football has become a professional sport. As soon as you allowed money in, Coach Saban told them, don't do this. You're going to allow money into this, and it's going to change football, and you're not going to like it. Well, they didn't listen. So now we're trying to come up with schemes to keep kids to playing and stop quitting on their teams. So we'll see how this turns out. Tomorrow will be a meeting and some more news. Coach Obrian from Alabama offensive coordinator will be meeting for the head coach job with the Jacksonville Jaguars. You heard it here first. If you hadn't already seen it, it was on a few minutes ago. So Obrian to the Jacksonville Jaguars, we don't know. I'm sure he's getting the team ready to go play Georgia up in Indy. And after that, we'll see where his future lies. Let's finish up with Joe here. Again, we appreciate you guys for stopping here and tuning in with me just for a little bit and go over some of these things that Joe likes to talk about. And I agree with him most of the time, like I said, but sometimes I don't. So, again, thank you guys for tuning in here. Big Matt here on the Matt and Todd Show, the Locker Room Show. We appreciate it.
This is my version of a 12-team playoff. Klatt's 12-team playoff. I would seed the top 6 champions 1 through 6. Okay, you'd have to win your conference to be a top 6 seed, and then everyone gets slotted in after that. The first round would be at the top seed, home site on campus, and I think that we would have some great games within the playoff, and you might have some upsets, not like what we get now in the 4-team version of the playoff. Gosh, this would be so good. It would be so good, and I think that we're close. I really do. I think that the powers that be in college football need to really put their heads together and get over some of these small hurdles in order to give college football what I think would benefit the whole, which is an expanded playoff, an expanded meaning of college football, an expanded postseason that allow teams to build towards the future, less opt-outs that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and ultimately better and more competitive games.
Well, that's about it on that. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me for a little while, and we'll cut this thing off, and y'all enjoy the rest of your day. Remember, I may be on tomorrow with some more new stuff. We've got some things going on. New Year's kicking off. I hope everybody has just been blessed as I have, and it's going to be a great, great year here for Matt and Todd Show. We've got a lot of cool new stuff coming. We will be live now Sunday. If you want to see some more, we'll talk about some more of these games that went on. We'll go break down a few more of those, and of course, we'll break down the big game. Alabama, Georgia. National Championship game will be Monday. We're going to try to do maybe a watch party Monday, and you could come on live with us and hang out and watch the game and talk to us and tell us what y'all think about the game as it's going on. So, all right, we appreciate it, and we'll catch y'all probably tomorrow sometime. All right, peace.